Good morning. It is Sunday. What date are we? We are, let me think, it's the 11th on Friday, so we're Sunday the 13th of August today. And it's 8 o'clock in the morning, which is why I'm still in my pyjamas. I couldn't podcast yesterday because my flatmate's two little boys are here with us this weekend, and it was rather noisy. They're still in bed at the moment, but when they get up anyway, they're going to go out to their nannies for Sunday lunch, which will give me a bit of peace and quiet time anyway to edit the video. So before I get into all of that stuff, I really should introduce myself. My name is Jared, or Peter, or Boniface. I am a former monk and a former bus driver. I am a current knitter, crocheter, weaver, sewer, wannabe quilter. I live in Abingdon in Oxfordshire, 7 miles, it's a market town 7 miles to the south of the city of Oxford, in England, in the United Kingdom. I could say on Earth, in the solar system, in the galaxy Milky Way, in the universe, just like we used to do when we were little children. And I have been involved with the fibre arts now for pretty much exactly a year. My first project I finished on the 10th of August last year, my first crochet project, which was a cluster scarf, which was a gift for a friend for her birthday. And in that year, all things fibre related has had a profound impact on my life, I would say. It's taken over my bedroom, certainly, with the amount of storage that I now have for stash and related items. But it's been a very positive 12 months. I'm very happy that I finally discovered the joy of knitting. I was taught to knit a very long time ago by my mother when I was probably 9 or 10, and made little purses and pom-poms and various other bits and pieces, and used a French loom to do I-cord for her. And unfortunately, as is often the way, the intervening 30 years I completely ignored the skill that I'd learned. And it was only being off work last year, unwell, that led me to take up crochet, simply because I bought a magazine, or had a magazine bought for me that had a crochet hook on the front cover. And that was also when I learned the joys of YouTube as well. I'm very late to the party, but I've made up for that in the intervening 12 months. And I know it's had a very positive impact on my life, and I think it's had a very positive impact on other people as well, which is good. So, I've not podcast for the last 3 weeks because there have been significant changes in my work life. We have had a bit of a restructuring, and a new person has been brought in. Sorry, I'll just move that out of the way and make it less untidy. And a new person has been brought in my department to head the department, which, wasn't. It's okay. He's a very good chap. He's got extensive knowledge and experience, and has a certain skill set that I don't possess yet. I felt I could have developed into that role if I'd been given opportunities. But all that aside, I've been asked to take on a different role, which itself has significant development opportunities, and I'm very positive about the impact I can have in my new role. As a result of that, I have been extremely busy the last few weeks trying to get things into shape. The role I've taken on is managing a department, and a smaller department within the large department. And not so much managing the people, but managing the processes, because when the department was set up 12, 15 years ago, it was cutting edge, state of the art technology. And because it worked, it's never been upgraded in any way, shape, or form. And it still works, it works perfectly fine, but it's probable that we could make it work even better and even more efficiently going forward, and that's really what I've been tasked with doing. So that's a challenge, which is positive, and it is a promotion, so that's also positive. It's extra work, which actually is positive as well, because I've been doing what I've been doing now for so long that it doesn't take half as long as it used to take when I first started, and so having more to do is actually a very positive thing, because there's nothing worse than idleness. So, long-winded introduction there, but all those things aside, it's been generally a positive few weeks. I've introduced a new member to my family. My hours of work have shifted forward, so I work 6:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. now, every day, which is excellent in that I get home about 2:30, and then until I go to bed about 9:30, 10 o'clock, that time is all available to me for crafting, and it's a good solid chunk of time, which means I'm getting a lot more done, and my life is more easily dividing up into work and life, and I'm getting much better balance. And in order to facilitate me getting to work on that time in the morning, and also because I will be available on call for emergencies over weekends, every other weekend, I bought a car, just a second-hand car. It's a smart car, so it's only a two-seater, 600cc engine, and her name is Tootsie, or Toots for short, and she's a little darling. And I'll put a picture in so that you can see her, but anyone who follows me on Instagram will have already been introduced. Excuse me, sorry. There's a lot of cat hair around this morning, so my allergies are a little bit up in the air. So yes, I have my new member of the family. I've always named my cars, and Tootsie is a fun-time girl who's, like me, not entirely there. So she is very fuel economic and very zippy, because she's very light and very compact. She's also rather like the TARDIS in that she looks very small on the outside, but when you get in the inside you can get two full-grown adults inside quite comfortably, plus their luggage. So it's a very well-designed car, in that everything is compacted down to the smallest space it needs, but not so far that it's actually too small for the purpose. So yeah, overall the last couple of weeks have been very positive, and that's better. And we're back. So I don't actually, with all the changes that have been happening, and also because I think of the nature of the projects that I've been working on, I don't really have any finished objects. Having said that, I do have finished objects, but I'm not sure if I've shown these finished before. But the shawl cardigan now has its buttons on it, and the buttons are little wooden bunny rabbits, which I think is wonderful. It's a really sweet cardigan. This is going to go for a little girl. And I had some of the wool left, so I decided to make a cloche style hat as well. So the flower goes on the side of the head, and the brim will turn up at the front like that, and it will... Curiously, the patterns for these two, and I kept gauge, the patterns for these two items worth for 6 to 12 months. That's an extraordinarily large head for what is actually quite a small body, although I haven't blocked this yet, and I suspect once I block it, it will actually block out a little bit further. I really quite like the finish on this, the garter edge to the cuffs and to the waistband. It's a really simple raglan increase top-down cardigan with button band, and the arms stitched on later, knitted on later in the round. So that's my kind of finished objects, I guess. I wasn't sure if I had shown those before, so if I have, I apologise for showing them again. If I hadn't, well, there we are. That's two finished, properly, completely finished objects, ends woven in, buttons fastened on, everything complete. I do have a number of whips that I have been actively working on. This may be familiar. I'll just make sure I don't lose any stitches before I pick it up. This is the top-down raglan sweater that I've been knitting. A Tin Can Knits pattern. It's a 1x1 rib neck, a lovely garter stitch panel over the top of the arm, so this will go all the way down the sleeve, and then just a plain stockinette stitch for the body. I started this. This is the Lion Brand wool, fisherman's wool, which is 100% wool and is virgin wool, and so has some of the oils, natural oils, still in it, which means that as I'm knitting and the wool goes through my fingers, they actually feel incredibly soft. It's a really lovely wool. I started this, as I say, in February, and I'd only been knitting for about 3 weeks, and perhaps as is ever the way with me, I perhaps jumped in sooner than I should have with this jumper, and I put it aside for a while I was working on some of the children's items, and came back to it last week because I was just sorting out bits and pieces and finding out where I was with various items, and I knew I'd made mistakes in the item, particularly with the raglan increases, and I didn't feel my stitch count was right, and the gauge seemed to have wandered somewhat, so I frogged the whole item, and I recast it on last Sunday, and so this is a week's worth of knitting. It's a really nice knit because the wool itself is pleasant to touch and attractive. It's the oak tweed colourway, and it's basically a light brown, chocolate brown, strand that's plied with a kind of natural beige colour. And you can see the overall effect is of quite an attractive patterning. Given that it's a basic stockinette body, I think if I'd been doing cables, it would have been the wrong choice. But with it being such plain knit on the whole, then having the interest within the yarn itself, I think, has been very positive. So I'm really pleased with the progress I've made on this. I'm coming towards the end of my first yarn ball. Because I'd frogged it and it got a little bit tangled towards the end of the frogging, I had to split the yarn, so I've had to join the second half of the second ball, or the final third of the first ball rather. And the way I've done that is I've knit with 2 strands for about half a dozen stitches under the arm, and then I'll weave in the 2 long ends and make sure that they're completely secure, and I don't think you can't see the join at all in the stitches, which I think is excellent. And yes, so I'm really pleased with the way it's coming on so quickly. I separated for the sleeves last night, so they're currently on stitch mark holders, and once I finish the body, which is a lot of stockinette stitch down to the waistline, I'll then go back and pick up those stitches and knit the arms, knit the sleeves to the required length. I used a cast on which uses a lot of slip stitches, so it's quite an involved cast on, but the effect it gives is that you can't actually tell where the cast on line is because it uses a provisional cast on, and then the 1x1 rib seems to just roll over, and it makes it completely stretchy. And although that's quite a small hole and I have quite a large head rather, I'll just demonstrate. It so easily fits over my head, but then gathers right round my neck, which is just where I want to wear it. So I'm really quite pleased with this so far. Obviously I can't stretch it out further because I've got stitches on the live stitches on the needles and I don't want to pull them out. But it's going extremely well, and I'm very happy with the progress I'm making on this, and I'm just enjoying the process of knitting this. I've only got one stitch marker on the main body now, which is the beginning of round marker. This is my Carl's hat from The Walking Dead. But I've left, they said you could take them out, but I've actually left the stitch markers that indicate the beginning and end of the garter panel. And these are those lovely owl stitch markers that I have. There we are, I think you can see. And they mark the beginning and end, as I say, of the garter panel, so that I just know to knit to the garter panel, and then every other row I purl the garter panel, and then knit to the end of the row again. So that's going very well. So I have been working on having frogged this particular jumper, I had another look at my cardigan that I've been working on, which is the cabled cardigan, and again the stitching was very irregular. So I'm actually doing this on a straight needle. I frogged that as well, and I've recast that on. This is just a normal cast on. I think I did a knitted cast on for this because it's not doesn't have to stretch in the way that the neckline does. And this is the back panel of the cardigan, and I think you can see the two cables sections here coming up, and then this lovely, it's actually a 1x1 rib that's separated every few lines by a garter row, 2 rows, a knit and purl row, and it just produces this rather pleasant texture. It's a little bit involved, but it's not a mindless knit in that every line is different, but within each line it is a fairly mindless knit because it's a repetitive pattern across. So it's actually, once I know which line I'm on and have read the first set of instructions, it's very easy to actually go through the whole line without having to refer back to the pattern very much. So I do have to pay some attention, but not complete attention to that. Oh, and I've just mentioned I'm using my knitting board with the handy lamp, which I don't need at this time of the day, but I did need it last night and it's very useful to have. So the other item that I'm knitting for myself, there we are, is just behind, is my jumper. I have knit a few more lines on this, but not made as much progress because I've been concentrating on the flax. Sorry, yes, the pattern for this is flax. It's a free pattern available on Tin Can Knit's website, which is a Canadian pattern company who have lots of patterns, most of them paid for, but they have a simple collection of hats and cardigans and jumpers and mitts and scarves. And flax is their simple jumper pattern, which actually goes from 0 to 6 months all the way up to 4 times extra large. And they've given all of the dimensions within. So what I've done is I've just drawn a square around the size that I'm making, so that I don't end up accidentally making too few or too many lines or stitches or whatever. And my stitch count has been absolutely spot on all the way around, which I'm very pleased about. And yeah, so this is the vintage look Stylecraft. I want to say 20% wool, 80% acrylic. It's really soft. Now the interesting thing is there are the same number of lines of knit on this wool as there are on this wool, and they're both DK, but this one seems to be a lot thinner, and so it's taking many more rows to actually make the fabric, but it's going well. Again, that's a fairly mindless knit. It's knit across one way and then purl back the other way, which is something I can do when sitting and watching a podcast or watching TV. But I've not made that much more progress on that because I've been focusing on this, and I think I'll probably finish this jumper first before I go back to that one. I'm really keen to get this jumper done because I really like the wool as much as anything else. So that's the knitting I'm doing for myself. I've also been crocheting, but not for me, for the babies. And I've made some very good progress on a matinee coat. It's a free pattern, so I can talk about it quite happily. And it's for this matinee coat here. It's the pattern buttoned jacket, they're calling it, but for me it's a matinee jacket. So I've made the yoke and the body, and I've started one of the two arms. The body is a kind of moss stitch, so you do alternating. I'll use the UK terms. You alternate a double crochet and a treble crochet across and then back, so that the double crochet in the first row has a treble crochet in it, and the treble crochet in the first row has a double crochet in it, and so after 2 rows you end up with an even line, and then double crocheted all the way around the edge. But the sleeves are double crochet and chain 1, double crochet, chain 1, and then it's chain 1, double crochet for the next row. I find I don't enjoy this. I've tried it on other items before. I just don't enjoy doing this. So it's very quick, but it's not. I'm not enjoying this particular part of the pattern. I really enjoy doing the yoke and the body. I know I've just got to get those done because I've got a second one to do as well. I've used almost 100 grams of yarn for this, but I do have two balls of this, so in fact I've got plenty to get it finished. And then I've got to do the button band that goes across, the 2 button bands that go across here, and then it's finished. So but as I say, I've got to make a second one because there are 2 babies coming in September, so I've got to get a crack on with that. And I tend to pick that up after I've done a few rounds of this and just do a couple of bits of that, because if I break up the monotony of that then and go back to this, which I'm really enjoying, I don't feel quite so bad about the whole process. Not that I feel bad about it anyway, but you know, I'm just being honest and realistic about my motivations. There are some things I enjoy and some things I less enjoy. I don't not enjoy it, but I enjoy it less, perhaps, and possibly because it's a solid yarn. It's just an acrylic yarn. It's the Stylecraft Special, which is very soft and squishy. I've said before, I don't have an issue using acrylic yarns. They can be very good. They can be very plasticky as well, and rough and cheap feeling and thin, but I find that the Stylecraft acrylics are very pleasant to use and soft enough to give for baby's clothing. Sorry, I'm just going to have to stop a second. I've had to close the bedroom door while I'm recording so I don't disturb the rest of the household, and one of the cats is getting a bit shirty because she can't get in. So I'll just be back in a moment. Yes, so Bunty's in now, so she's happy. So that's it in terms of my works in progress. In terms of anything I've actually worked on, I will be picking up the sock again, I think, after I finish the jumper. I really am enjoying this knit. Oh, there is one thing about this knit that I didn't mention. I'm knitting in the round on circular needles, and it really is now just knitting in the round rather than magic loop. But one of the things that I accidentally did, which I think is worth mentioning because it's actually helped tremendously. One of the problems with knitting in the round is that you knit onto the right hand needle and the stitches travel all the way back around and come round and then get caught coming back onto the needle because the cable is a lot thinner than the needles. When I did the 1x1 rib at the top, I used 4.5mm needles, and then I changed to the 5mm needle to do the main body of the main fabric of the jumper. So I took off my right hand needle, the one that wasn't holding the stitches live, and put on my 5.5mm needle, but left the 4.5 on the other side. And in fact, having the 5.5 on the working needle and the 4.5 on the needle that's being worked means that the stitches slide on here really easily, and I found that that has significantly helped to speed up the knitting. The gauge is still consistent because the stitches are being formed on the 5.5mm needle, but by the time I come to work them again, they're just easily sliding over the 4.5mm needle. So that's just, I just thought I'd mention it as an accidental tip, if you like, that I've discovered. Obviously it only works with interchangeables because on my fixed circular needles it's the same size needle on both sides. I'm glad I've discovered it though, because it really has helped. One of the things I've always found is that to speed up my knitting I need to be constantly pushing the stitches that way to make them move towards the tip of the left hand needle, and it can be a struggle sometimes getting them on, and particularly if you try to push too many on, the first ones gets caught and then the rear ones are pushing up against an immovable object. So I just thought I'd mention that because it was accidental, and it really does work extremely well. It feels a little odd because these stitches on the left hand side feel incredibly loose, but then when you take them across to the right hand side they're not. So you just have to trust yourself. And I have to say, I'm really pleased. I did do a swatch, but I've measured my gauge twice subsequently as I've been working through this, and I'm absolutely spot on the gauge that they want for the jumper. There's a lot of positive ease in this jumper anyway. It's because it's a raglan jumper and doesn't have seams, it doesn't really have structure. And being wool, it is going to grow rather than shrink, unless I put it into the dryer, of course. But generally speaking, it will be a hand wash item anyway, but it's going to... the tendency is going to be for it to get bigger, not smaller. And it's not going to be held in its shape by the side seams as, say, my other jumper, which is being made in different panels and then will be sewn together at the end, seamed together. So there is a lot of positive ease on this jumper anyway. So the swatch, the gauge it's only important really for the length, and being a top-down construction, the length is adjustable as you're making it anyway. So I wasn't really too concerned about making sure that my gauge was absolutely spot on for this particular item. Whereas the other item, it is very important because it is seamed, and so there will be a lot less give in the item. But yeah, I was really pleased that, in fact, I'm meeting gauge, and that's even with this little tip that I've mentioned. And I just love these Knit Pro needles, the Zings. They are... I do enjoy using the Chinese needles, the cheap Chinese needles, circulars that I've got, and I don't even mind using. These are the pony straights. I do. This is my issue with the straight needles, and especially if I'm wearing a shirt with sleeves, because they get caught in the holes at the bottom. But they're even they're nice to use. But the Zings are by far and away my favourite needles. They fit my hand perfectly. Everything slides easily, but not so that my stitches fall off. I just find them really very, 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 very nice to use. I was really pleased I bought these, and I'm really pleased that my friend Wendy has got a set of these as well. I love them so much, I think I might even buy another set, because I only have one of each size. So, get away, Bunty. Don't be a silly sausage. So, yes. Acquisitions, then. Well, I've mentioned Rib Magazine before, edition 2. I obviously have thrown away edition 1, somehow it's gone forever. So I rebought volume 1, which I'm glad I did, because I'd forgotten there is an item in here that I actually want to make, which is this cushion cover. I just think that patterned cover, with the plain knit background and then the textured areas, I just think it will be a fun knit to make on the one hand, and is also something that's going to be very tactile. So I just need to find the right yarn to make that with. Again, I think I might make that. I've got a couple of end of line 100% wool yarns, but not in large enough quantities to make an item of clothing, possibly a scarf or a hat and gloves, but certainly not socks, because they're 100% wool, and I think possibly that might be, and the one I'm thinking of is a Wendy yarn, and it's speckled, so I think speckling might work with that patterning as well. And whilst I was buying that, because of the postage, I thought, well, I might as well buy some wool. So I did. This is a 3-ply sock yarn. Sorry, the camera's on this side today. And it is a natural dye. They call it rose briar, but the dye is cochineal and something else, which I can't see because I've not got my glasses on. My glasses are over there, so I'm not going to get them now. But it's really rather attractive. The colour you're getting there is actually, that's not a bad representation. So it's a kind of purplish lavender, heatherish kind of colour. And so I've got 2 skeins of that, 2 70-gram skeins, I think they are. 50-gram skeins, sorry. Hanks. So I will make I think probably I might try the Susan B. Anderson smooth operator socks with the afterthought heel for these. Lots of people have talked about them being such a lovely vanilla sock, and I thought I might as well. So at some point, I don't know quite when, but at some point I will be casting those on. It is a sock yarn because it's 80% wool and 20% nylon. So that's that. And the website I got that from, actually I will get up, because I will get the card, which is here. I saw it straight away, so it was easy to find. The card that came with it is this Wild and Woolly, which is a UK-based retailer, online, established in 2014. I ordered these on the Saturday after I recorded the last podcast. They arrived on the Monday afternoon, which frankly is a phenomenal turnaround. They must have dispatched them the very same day, which I was expecting it maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that week. For them to have arrived by the time I got home from work that Monday was actually quite astonishing. So I thoroughly recommend them. The prices are competitive for the items that they're selling. And I can't fault their customer service. It was absolutely perfect. So that was my acquisitions. I'm not buying anything for the time being. I've got an awful lot of stuff in here, and it's beginning to crowd in on me a little bit. So I want to use what I have a little bit more. Maybe organise it better into colour ranges so that I can see better what I've got, rather than at the moment they're sorted into yarn types, which is in itself fine. But actually, I think the colour palette process will help me better decide what I want to make and colours that I want to mix and match, because it's all a bit chaotic at the moment. And it's going to get slightly more chaotic because a friend of mine, her friend's mother has Alzheimer's like my mother, sadly. And she was a prolific knitter and crocheter in her day, but like my mother, no longer can. But she still goes online and buys wool and equipment and other things. So I have been promised 3 big bags of wool, because she has 6 to get rid of, and she keeps 3 for herself. Some of it will be for me, but I'm also hoping to take it into school, because I'm a governor for one of the local primary schools, and they have a programme in the school on a Friday afternoon called Springboard, which is an extracurricular activities programme. And one of the things I'd quite like to do is to get them involved in fibre-related activities. And my idea is to do some French loom knitting. So the idea I have in my head is to get toilet rolls and the innards and lollipop sticks, and we can glue the lollipop sticks 4 on at the north, south, east, west on the inside of the toilet roll holder, and then hey presto, you have your own I-cord loom, and get them making I-cords. And I think there are several stages and several activities within that, and then even after they've made the I-cords, we can then turn the I-cords into something like a bracelet or a necklace or a coaster by coiling it and gluing the coil. So I think it'll be there are several stages of creativity that can be employed with the children, and I think it will actually be a very positive little program. And so having lots of extra yarn that I've not had to pay for, so I don't care in a sense what happens with it, although I do obviously, but in one sense I don't. It wouldn't matter if it's going to be utilised in that way, whereas I wouldn't want one of my £30 hanks of yarn being used because that's not really it's not really what I bought luxury yarn for. So yeah, so I'm hoping to do that, but I need to reassert control of my stash, I think. So I'm being extremely good, despite temptation being put in my way yesterday. Bob, Wendy, you know who you are. I am being very good, and I am trying to get things back under control. So that's basically the knitting side and weaving side and, well, crocheting side of things taken care of. I am hoping to take a week's annual leave at the end of August, so I will have a full week at home, being able to get on top of some of the projects. In particular, I think I will spend that week breaking the back of the quilt that I want to make as a wedding present, because the wedding is getting closer and I need to get onto that. And there are a couple of quick makes for the babies that are due in September that I want to get finished as well. So I think that week will be mostly the quilting and those 2 items that I want to finish making for the babies. So on to other matters of interest, I guess. One of the reasons why I've not been YouTubing, podcasting in the last couple of weeks is also to do with YouTube itself. Previously, I've edited these videos using the YouTube video editor. From the beginning of next month, that editor is no longer going to be available. So I only have very basic... The advantage that the YouTube editor gives is that it can do very basic things very well and make videos look, I wouldn't say professional, but certainly completed, with very little effort. But it's being withdrawn, so I've grasped the thistle with both hands, or the nettle. Is it a nettle or a thistle you grasp? Grasp the nettles, I guess. I think it's nettles, actually, but it could be thistle. They're both prickly. I've grasped whatever it is with both hands and decided to download and learn to use a video editing software suite. I'm only still using the basic version because I'm only making basic videos. I'm not making broadcast quality videos. It wouldn't be right for this kind of podcast. This is a domestic interest podcast anyway. It's just my ramblings, really. So I'm not. I don't want to produce a shoddy piece of work, but it doesn't have to be perfect to the nth degree. But there are a lot more things that can be done using this video software, and unfortunately, the basics are not as basic as they are on YouTube. So there's quite a steep learning curve even to do the basic stuff, and there's not much of a learning curve between the basic and the intermediate stuff. So I've been embracing the pain, as it were, and trying to learn some techniques and trying to learn the software. So it may be a little bit hit and miss. I know there was a significant issue with the last video. For some reason, first time I edited it on this system, it flipped the video upside down, so I flipped it back. But of course it hadn't flipped it, what it had actually done was rotated it. So when I flipped it back, it basically made a mirror image. So you were looking over from that side this way rather than from that side this way, was the overall effect. And then the sound didn't quite sync up with the words, with the pictures of me speaking, as it were. So there were a few issues, and I'm hoping that I will have worked out what was going on and be able to put it right. I suspect part of it is the basic equipment I use to record. I'm using an iPad which is several years old, and I'm just using the internal microphone, and it's not separating out the voice track from the video track. So when you import it into a more professional video editing software suite, it produces some small glitches that is actually quite difficult to correct. But we'll see. If necessary, I will invest at some point in better equipment. I mean, not a huge amount of money, but there are some quick and simple things I can do if the need arises. So that's partly... Although I'm recording this Sunday morning, I have absolutely no idea when it will have been finished editing, so hopefully not too long, but it could be Thursday next week before I actually get this uploaded. But I'm hoping to have it uploaded by Sunday evening, all things being equal. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about. There were a couple of other things I wanted to talk about, and I think one of them is I've been doing some reading and I've mentioned before the psychological benefits of knitting and crocheting, and most of the benefits that I focused on have been focused on the centering, the mindfulness that knitting and crocheting and weaving and sewing can create. But I think that there are 4 areas actually that can be properly categorised as the benefits of this kind of creative work. The first is that repetitive action like this, I did not realise, but it really actually does have a powerful impact on the brain in that serotonin is released. Serotonin is the chemical in the brain which is often either absent or that is not up, the reuptake is too quick, which is one of the things that can lead to a person suffering from depression. So knowing that this kind of repetitive action actually is having a physiological impact on your brain in that it is producing more serotonin and therefore reducing the ill effects of depression or averting the onset of depression is a very positive thing. And I wasn't aware of that, but as I say, I've been doing some reading online, and there are plenty of studies that show this. And it's one of the reasons why, and I guess I should have realised, it's one of the reasons why occupational therapy is such an important part of treatment in mental health institutions, which as I say, I should have realised before, but it was interesting actually having it spelt out in front of me. And the second thing is something I have talked about before, which is the joy, the pleasure of creating something and of giving that something to somebody else. I think I've mentioned, and lots of podcasters have mentioned actually, the sense of community and the nature of the community that makes up the knitting world. I'll say knitting rather than knitting and crocheting. The majority of people knit. And I'm knitting at the moment. That the kind of people who do knitting are the kind of people who are kind, if you like. They are the kind of people you want to know. I'm knitting for myself, so it's not that we are totally altruistic and selfless people, but there is a joy in making an item and giving it to somebody, and then enjoying the item that you've given them. I'm making socks for myself. I can buy 7 pairs of socks in Primark for £2. I don't need to make socks for myself. And I certainly don't need to make socks for other people. But a handmade pair of socks using a £10 ball of yarn, and that's taken 20 hours, or whatever the hourly breakdown is, to make, depending upon the patterns and speed of knitting and all the rest of it. What you're giving them isn't a pair of socks. What you're giving them is so much more. You're giving them your time. You're giving them your thoughtfulness. You're giving them your mindfulness. One of the things I said to a friend that I gave a blanket to last year, it was the yarn for the whole blanket cost me less than £20. But I spent 4 weeks doing nothing else but that blanket. And throughout that whole time, I was thinking of that person. And so the mindfulness is not just about being in the moment for your own sense of not stressing about the past or being worried about the future, but just being involved in what you're doing here and now. There is that mindfulness for you, but there is also the bringing to mind of the person for whom you're making the item. And it's a very powerful thought that every stitch within this item I have had in mind the person for whom I'm making the item. So for this jumper, maybe the selfishness of thinking about myself while making this, it's an opportunity to think about myself, because as a society we rightly don't encourage that kind of selfishness. We try to encourage that selflessness. But if you're making something for yourself, then you have to feel positive about who you are. You don't make something for someone you don't like. And so there is a significant benefit, again, with mental health, that we all have body image issues, we all have identity issues, there are things about ourselves that we don't like, and we all have them, and mental illness is when those issues of self-worth take over our lives, is one aspect of mental illness. And so giving yourself permission to like yourself, giving yourself the opportunity to make something for yourself, and think about yourself, and enjoy the process of the making something for yourself, is actually also in itself a very important thing. Just to go off on a slight tangent, it is only a slight tangent. One of the things I really like about the knitting community and the podcast YouTube world that I've discovered is the voice it gives to women in particular. I worry about the body image ideals that young men are now being confronted with every day by the perfectly sculptured, ripped torsos that advertise all products everywhere. But women have been living with that unachievable ideal body for even longer. And one of the things that knitting or sewing your own clothes or knitting your own clothes does for you as an individual is it allows you to design or to adapt a design to fit your specific body shape, to fit specifically you, to flatter your shape, to make you feel good about yourself and what you're wearing. And it also allows and gives that voice to women. Most of the designers of major fashion houses are male, but most of the designers for knitting in particular, I've noticed, are female, which I think is an interesting thing. So although I'm very keen on things like Red Magazine is itself an acknowledgement that in the fibre arts world, at least, men are the minority. Men are not in control, men are not in charge, women have a voice, women are empowered, and they empower themselves. And if they empower themselves as nurturers, and that's the image of themselves that they choose to have, then it's not being imposed, it's what they've adopted for themselves, it's how they see themselves, and it's a very feminist matter, without being strident. It's not the political feminism, it's women doing what they want and not needing other people's permission, input, assistance. They're doing it for themselves. And I find that very affirming matter. And I think that's all tied up with the body image idea anyway, so that's why I think that wasn't inappropriate to bring it in at that point. And I think the third thing is to do with the mindfulness. Perhaps less so with a pattern like this, but certainly with a pattern like this. As I say, I don't need to be. I'm not looking at the pattern every stitch I'm making, but I am counting the stitches. I know I need to knit one, purl one, knit one for 36 stitches, and then I need to purl two, knit one, and so on and so forth, and all the way across. And it gives just enough concentration that it puts your mind in this moment, this mindfulness, this centering in the here and now, which relieves your mind from the stress and anxiety of the past or the future, worrying. And again, helping with mental health issues, that mindfulness here and now, and that lack of concern about anything else while you're doing this is a relief. And so the fourth and final item is something which this really did surprise me, and is fascinating for me. Um, and it's to do with the brain structure itself, because we often take a moral view of mental health. You know, pull yourself together. Why are you despairing? Do you not believe in God? All these kinds of questions that are asked, that we ask ourselves and that other people ask us. But a lot of mental health issues is actually down just to brain architecture not working properly. So the serotonin is either not produced or is reabsorbed too quickly, and so it doesn't actually do what it needs to do in the brain to begin with. But on top of that, there has been significant research done since the 1970s, in particular since the 1990s, which is about the effect that working on something with both hands actually has on the well-being of the brain. The brain works better if there is a creative activity using both hands. So if you sit watching TV doing nothing, your brain is effectively not being exercised. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities of it, but that can produce feelings of lethargy and feelings of exhaustion that, perversely, being active whilst watching TV or having a conversation, as I'm doing now, actually energises you. You'd think that knitting would actually tire you out, whereas sitting there doing nothing and just absorbing would be more relaxing. The converse is true. Actually being active with your hands is forcing your brain to remain focused and active. You listen and watch better, you understand and hear more, on the one hand, and when you finish knitting, you actually feel energised and go off and do something else. So it is not time wasted sitting there knitting, it is actually your 50 minutes at the mind gym, if you like, and you're just taking a breather, having a warm-up or a warm-down with your brain before you go off and do whatever else it is that needs to be done. And I just find that, having read these studies, and I mean, clearly this is experimental psychology and neuroscience, and we are taking our first tentative steps into the area of neuroscience. There is so much more we yet don't know. But it is interesting that the more we learn about mental health issues, the more we learn about physical brain architecture and biomechanisms in the brain, the more and more knitting and crochet and similar activities, and particularly creative activities. So I guess woodworking would be the same, although it would be difficult to do woodworking while watching TV. But, you know, practical creative activities actually they are changing the way our brains are for the better. They are literally making us better people. And I find that really something very much to be celebrated and enjoyed. That it's, even if you're just doing it for yourself, and so there is no external benefit to other people, there is the external benefit of me being a happier, better, more mindful, more self-expressed, more self-satisfied individual, so that when I go out into the world with other people, I'm a happier, brighter, more capable presence in that world. So I realise I've been chuntering on for a good few minutes on that, but I just wanted to share these thoughts because they're things I've just discovered, and I'm really happy that I've discovered those things, because I felt the changes within myself, and it's easy to put that down to the medication that you take and so on and so forth, but actually the medication plays an important role. But clearly this occupational therapy, this creative art, has really significantly helped. And I just wanted to share the good news with you. So yes, that's where we are at the moment. I have I have nothing else to talk about today, so I think I will sign off now. Hopefully, the software won't be too impossible to work with, and I will have this video uploaded for you later today. Um, if not, it will be uploaded at some point, and I hope you enjoy watching it. If you do enjoy this video, please remember to give it a like, and if you want to have notifications of when my next video will be up, click the subscribe button. Thank you very much for spending this time with me, and I hope it's been a pleasant few weeks for you, and I will look forward to spending some time with you again soon. Goodbye.